So good morning, everybody, and very welcome to this Pharma Integrates Track 4 panel. I'm delighted to have been asked to chair this. Obviously, it would have been great to have done it in person, but having been at Biointegrates yesterday, then obviously this has worked, and we've had some good participation. So thanks again. I'll introduce my esteemed panel very shortly. But first, I'm just going to read out just a few words about this session and what we can expect. So excuse this reading here. So this is called Partnership for Innovation: How Medicines Will Be Made in the Future. We aspire to bring together the incredible talents of pharma tech industry to bring forward the next generation of therapeutics, delivered in a cheaper and also greener way. It's now apparent that true collaboration holds the key to realizing this aspiration. Science-led innovation on both sides of the fence is required to ensure access to the best experience, expertise, and infrastructure wherever it resides. The them and us outsourcing model of the past is being replaced, wherein innovation partnerships are being leveraged to produce much more efficient and effective drug discovery, development, and supply. So I'm just going to start by introducing myself very briefly, and then I'll walk around the panel in alphabetical order, but starting with Katie. So just to introduce myself, my name is Richard Weaver. I'm currently the Senior Vice President of Preclinical Discovery at Signature Discovery, a CRO based at the headquarters here in Nottingham in the UK, where I'm residing today. Prior to that, going back several years, I've been in large pharma for many years. It was started at Astra, which became AstraZeneca, and I was there for 14 years in the drug discovery and metabolism, pharmacokinetic and metabolism area, supporting that whole space really in terms of understanding exposure and effect. The pharma industry changed massively, as we knew, sort of around the mid-2000s, where suddenly the model wasn't working, the return on investment wasn't working. We started to outsource primarily to cheaper Far Eastern CROs. In 2011, I left AstraZeneca and set up my own CRO called Xenergesis, and that's been a very successful CRO. We sold that to Signature Discovery this year in September. And I'm delighted to take on this new role. So I'm going to now introduce the panelists. So I'm going to first of all start with Katie, if that's okay. Thanks, Katie.
So I'm having a problem here. I've got another stream broadcasting through my computer. If somebody can help me with that, maybe you want to go to the other panelists first.
No problem at all, yeah.
Apologies for that.
No problem. So I'll move to David, please, if that's okay.
Yeah, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Richard, for that. Hi, everyone. So I'm David Harrison. I take care of partnering and alliance management for medical devices for UCB, and that includes other patient solutions. So I've been with UCB for, I guess, a long time, but I try not to measure it in terms of years, more like the number of medicines that I've seen coming from one end of the pipeline to the other, sort of gathering value like a snowball. We've seen quite a few in my many years there go from early preclinical even to commercialization and beyond. So I think I'm very lucky in that respect. I think this industry is judged on the patient benefits we can bring, and that's kind of the total outcome that we're going to be measured on. Each of us have to contribute towards that, whether it's pharma and all of our partners. It's part of a big value chain that we bring to patients. So I'm interested in collaborations that go beyond the medicine and that bring and seek that new patient value.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, David. If I could start with, go to Detlef next, please.
Yeah, so first of all, it's a pleasure, I think, to be here with you and on the panel and have that discussions. So from a background, I'm a pharmacist, have spent most of my life so far in the contract manufacturing industry, and was always, I think, dealing with companies working on new chemical entities, new technologies, to support them from a development and manufacturing perspective. In 2017, I've started together with my business partner an own company called Bay Pharma. And we just finished, I think, successfully phase 3 study on an innovative dermatology compound. So we are really, I think, involved in, I wouldn't say disruptive innovation, but at least a bit of innovation. And I believe that's really, I think, something where the pharma industry needs to be more efficient and focusing more on innovation, I think, to be ready for the future.
That's great. Thank you very much, Detlef. And if I can move on to Eric, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me on the panel. My name is Eric de Vos, working for Ajinomoto Omnichem, which is an affiliate of Ajinomoto, a quite large food, amino acid, and seasoning company. Ajinomoto Omnichem is positioning itself as a contract development and manufacturing organization under the brand Ajinomoto Biopharma Services. So at the global level, I'm the VP of Global Innovation, in close contact with the Ajinomoto Kawasaki laboratories, where a lot of new developments are ongoing, and overseeing the introduction of innovation both in Belgium, India, Japan, and in the USA, San Diego area. On the local level, I'm responsible for the R&D unit in Belgium, about 80 people, where we are only exclusively working on small molecules, but lately also on mid-sized molecules like oligonucleosides and peptides. Formerly, I've been running the business unit, pharmaceutical fine chemicals, as a kind of interim for a couple of years. And earlier, I was a project manager. So with customer relation, taking care of customer projects in the small molecule area. And from training, I'm a PhD. So that's how I started on in the Ajinomoto Omnichem as a research project manager for about 10 years. Thank you. Looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you very much, Eric. Can I move to Ross, please?
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Ross Byrne, the Chief Executive of CatSci Limited. A bit about me first. So backgrounds as an analytical chemist, cut my teeth at AstraZeneca for 4 years and then co-founded CatSci nearly 10 years ago now. So I classify myself as an entrepreneur, an erstwhile chemist. So what's CatSci about? CatSci, we are a innovation partner for large and emerging pharma companies. And what we like to do is to solve problems for our customers, but we specialise in the chemical development, so the process R&D for small molecule drug substance manufacture. And our purpose as an organisation is to develop economically and environmentally sustainable processes. What we're looking to do with the brand of CatSci is to evolve that. We're looking to go more into drug development across the CMC value chain. So we can't do that alone. As an organisation, we're a small company, 50 people based in Cardiff, so we're not locked down at the moment, which is great for our staff to be able to obviously have a good work-life balance. We've done the 2 weeks. So what we're looking to do is to partner organisations to be able to solve problems together in drug development. So form alliances, bolster our internal capabilities beyond just drug substance. So I'm looking forward to the panel discussion to find out other people's perspectives on how we can collaborate together to innovate for the benefit of patients.
That was great, Ross. Thank you very much. I understand now, if I had an earpiece, that apparently Katie is now online. So I'm just going to hand over to Katie for her introduction.
Yes, thanks, Richard, and apologies for that. Yes, Katie Murray. I'm the Technical Director at MMIC, which is the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre. I'm a chemical engineer by background and spent the bulk of my career in 2 large pharma companies, Merck in the US and more recently AstraZeneca in the UK. I've been with MMIC since the start of the year. And this is a cross-industry, academia, government-funded collaboration, which is in existence to accelerate the introduction of new technology into medicines manufacturing. And we want to do that both to reduce costs to patients, but also to reduce the environmental burden for the medicines manufacturing too. In my role at MMIC, I'm accountable for the design and also the delivery of our Grand Challenge portfolio, where Grand Challenges are ambitious transformational technology industrialization projects. and we deliver them through a collaborative approach. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion today.
That's great. Thank you very much, Katie. And hopefully you can see everybody today, you know, we've got a wide range of experience here, from very small companies to very large companies, from pharma to CROs to entrepreneurs, and people breaking those boundaries. So hopefully we can have a great discussion today. Before we get into the meat of the discussion, to be honest, I can't go forward without mentioning the events of this year. Okay, so you know, I don't think anybody would have predicted this back in January in terms of what's happened, and obviously today is a consequence of that, of how this platform has evolved today rather than being face to face. So, an open question. I've got plenty of thoughts on this as well, but I'd like to open this to the panel first of all, specifically around this. Really, you know, have the events of 2020 helped or hindered the drug discovery process? So, for example, have they made collaboration easier or harder? I can also answer that myself, but I'd love to throw that open to the panel and maybe get a view from the pharma, the CDMO as well, as also, you know, across the board. So if anybody would like to take that question first of all, please.
Yeah, so what I think it's a very interesting topic, and when we are seeing now what's happening with the COVID vaccines, the traditional pharma development cycle is plenty of years, and very often, I think, for very new technologies like the mRNA, it's taking even longer. And I think collaborations, partnerships to set up, I think that's usually an extremely long discussion process, long contract discussions and everything. But what we're seeing now is, I think we are now in November, and I think we are, at least can see 2 vaccines close to filing after successful clinical studies. So what we are seeing now is a very fast development. No one has expected this before. Second, I think implementation of a new innovative technology. And third, I think all under partnerships. And my view is, okay, if we can take a few of these learnings with us in the future of pharma, I think then COVID has something very positive for us.
Yeah, I think they're really good points, Detlef. You know, there's nothing like focus, you know, to train one's eye on that. I think, David, you were going to make some comments on that. I'm going to also bring in Katie. I know Katie had some points on our pre-meeting on this as well.
So I'm just going to support Detlef and you know, remind us all of the well-worn maxim that necessity is a mother of invention. But what I've been really impressed with from this whole COVID thing is the clinical trials, is the you know, taking the trials to the patient's bedside, recruiting in lightning fast fashion. I mean, that's absolutely awesome, and also the responsiveness of the NHS in particular. So when we found out that dexamethasone was useful, you know, that was rushed through. I think it took a matter of hours from that being published to being rolled out. So the responsiveness of clinical trials and the way that we can take trials to patients, I'd really like to try, you know, for the industry to hold on to and bring that forward to other indications and other innovations afterwards.
That's great, David. Thank you. And Katie, I think you've made some comments on this as well about how quickly pharma have moved in very extreme circumstances. And do you have any thoughts on how you think that might transfer into other areas, perhaps the small molecule area, for example?
Yeah, I think we have moved very quickly. I think it's come at quite a lot of cost to other things. So I think there's been a massive amount of focus and a huge amount of effort put into getting these trials off the ground really quickly, driving the collaborations, etc. And I think the challenge could be, how can we carry on doing that but make it more a business as usual activity? So what do we need to do differently in the way we interact with regulators, the way we use technology, the way we set up collaborations, so that can become more the norm and we can really maintain that speed? I think just to answer your question too, in terms of how has collaboration been easier or harder, I think some things have been easier because in a way some of the barriers have been a bit lower, and there's been a huge amount of pressure forcing speed, forcing collaborations, etc. I think my personal experience of trying to set up new collaborations and continue ones that are already running, I think the remote working has actually gone better than I would have anticipated for the most part. And I think where you have a good relationship and it's a fairly stable one, it can work very well remotely. I think when you're trying to set up something new or you hit periods of misalignment, I think then it gets more challenging, and I think it's harder to build and maintain the trust between collaborative partners when you can't see each other face to face and you can't just, have more of a casual chat over a beer or over a nice meal or something. It does make it more difficult, I think, when you hit challenges.
No, I absolutely agree with that, Katie, and especially, you alluded to the point there that, when you've not met somebody before at all, when the first time you meet them is in a situation like this, I think that's, in terms of human nature, it is more difficult, isn't it, to build those relationships, like you say, when you're not in an audience and everybody is listening to your every word. When you've got 20 people on a Zoom call, normal life doesn't happen like that. So. But there is a good point. Ross and Eric, do you have any further comments on that before we move on?
Maybe a little note. In terms of customer-supplier relationships, I think the COVID situation has forced and triggered much more virtual audits. Surely some companies were already busy with that, certainly related to the travel restrictions and people's time. It becomes more and more necessary to do things faster and more effective. And of course, with the new digital and IT solutions, this is apparently providing a solution to the current situation where people have to do things remotely. So, yeah.
That's great, thank you. And Ross, did you have any comments on that, please?
Yeah, just to echo that, I think our ways of working have evolved, perhaps over the last 6 months, accelerated a couple of years into a sort of digital transformation, across teams, across companies, to be able to communicate. We are looking to drive that forward as well, and embracing the sort of methodologies of sort of Industry 4.0 and thinking about how can we be a digital first company and continue. I think there will be more hybrid type events and hybrid type working in the future. I think you do need that better face-to-face contact for trust and to build relationships. But I think, working digitally, working virtually will have benefits across not just this sector, but across all industries.
But I think, Richard, we're gonna see a fallout. I don't know about anyone else, but the levels of activity that we and our teams are currently at, I think, are not sustainable. It's good in a way. So, a few months ago, we did an M&A activity in San Francisco. So not physically, everybody was wired day and night, morning calls with Brussels, late night calls with San Francisco. But, you don't get the downtime. As soon as that's over, you're straight back into the next thing. There's no respite. And I think we need to recognize that it's unparalleled times, but it's not particularly sustainable.
No, I agree with that. That's definitely moving more to a sort of philosophical discussion, David. But, that blurring of work time and off time and home time, especially when you're at home, is challenging. Just to add to that, it is amazing what you can achieve, as you say, virtually. We sold Xenergesis completely virtually. The whole legal due diligence, financial due diligence, the whole lot. So not met any of these people before, or many of them. But it worked and it was a success. But there are challenges. So yeah, that's a good point. I'd like to bring up innovation now, because this is what this is all about. And this thing that started off, I really like that, this them and us sort of mentality, if you will. If I wind back 2000, mid 2000s, when I was in a nice little protective pharmaceutical bubble where we used to do everything inside, and we didn't really know anybody outside of that bubble. That's how it used to be, didn't it? And it was very much a sort of them and us attitude to outsourcing, I think, wrongly, of course. And it's not like that anymore. It's clearly not like that. The expertise that are available in the CROs, in the CDMOs, in the biotechs as well, it's phenomenal, and I see that pharma is now embracing that model further, actually. So it is a true partnership. So would somebody like to just comment on that, please? And maybe David, you could perhaps start with the pharma hat on, maybe.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And you're right. I mean, we call ourselves an innovator pharma because we're in that niche, area where we're looking for, severe indications, unmet needs, but we're not particularly that large. So as an innovator, we're always trying to find those disruptive technologies, but it means that we're having to build the airplane whilst it's in the air, because the next big thing for our patients is something we've never seen before. And as I say, necessity is the mother of invention. But the key thing to remember is that inventions happen everywhere. As you say, that we're part of an ecosystem, a network that is tasked with bringing these inventions to patients. And as pharma, we're probably the ones with the most money, and we've got a duty there to stimulate innovation throughout the network. But what I'd say is that these types of patient solutions, they do rely on excellent underlying technology. So there has to be safe, pre-validated platforms to build on. And I've been lucky enough to do quite a few partnering activities on those key technology platforms, like expression technology, drug delivery, antibody selection technology, you name it throughout the value chain. There's so much there that we need to invest in and verify. And therefore, at least we can have the engines built, even whilst we're trying to take off on this plane that isn't fully formed. But what that means is that, as you say, life is more complex. And actually, what we found is that partnering has to be a core competency for pharma and for everyone else. But we have to then invest in our relationships. We have to make sure that those relationships are of mutual value. So it's less about procurement and purchasing discipline, and it's more about partnering and alliance management and seeking a mutual value.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, David. I know that Detlef, I'll come to you, Detlef, in a moment. I know you've got a good, perhaps a more, a different view on that. I'll come to that in a minute, Detlef. So I'm not going to hold you up, but maybe if I could come to say Ross next from a CRO perspective. How have you found that things have changed, Ross, in the last 10 years with regards to CatSci?
Yeah, I think it has changed. People are now empowering us to be the innovation partner, rather than maybe at the start being quite prescriptive on what we can do and what the brief really was. I think what's really happened in the whole industry, if you go back even to the biotechs, and I'm sure Detlef will pick up on this, but it's all about allowing scientists to be creative. And I think in some organisations that could have been quite stifling. You've got to do what the programmes are within organisations, and the rise of the biotech allow people to have that pioneering innovation. Then can be, that ideation, innovation can then be sort of accelerated because of being given the freedom to do it and getting the funding to do it. So a lot of it was VC backed. I think obviously the culture shift, I think, from CatSci to where myself and my colleagues have perhaps worked in the past is been able to create an environment where people can be creative and innovative. And I think it's a bit of a culture shift across the pharma industry too, which we're all taking the benefit of now.
No, that's great, thank you. And Detlef, from an entrepreneur and a biotech that's bursting with innovation, can we have your views?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, happy to do that. So let me play a bit the devil. So if we're looking into these CMOs, CROs, so they're usually in the meantime private equity funded. So their horizon is 3 years. That's way too short for, let's say, really creating innovation. Biotechs, I think they have the ideas, but they don't have the money and they don't have the skill set, I think, to bring it through registration. And large pharma, I think they are risk adverse. So they're happy to test a lot of interesting technologies. But once it's coming to filing, I think the views or the answers, has someone else filed it? If not, I think let's wait if someone else is doing it first, just to be safe. And I think that's what I'm believing is blocking us from innovation. And I think not to blame, I think the industry, I think we be claiming that a slightly better formulation, or I think the seventh slightly different new compound on the same indication is an innovation. And I think we can have a long debate if that's really innovation or it's just, I think, improving things. Innovation for me is really disruptive. And I think that's where we as pharma need to learn a lot from other industries. I think we need to be more flexible. We need to, I think, do it more in close collaborations. And at the moment, I think for me, it's still too much silo thinking, and everyone is waiting for the other one, and we're not really moving forward.
Yeah, I think there's some really good points, Detlef. Certainly in my experience of working with CROs, working in the CRO industry and founding a CRO, I've been amazed how quickly things can go into human clinical trials when there is a real will and a real drive to do the key experiments only, actually, and take that risk and get into humans very quickly. With the appropriate safety as well. So I certainly have seen that. I mean, Eric and Katie, do you have any further comments? I've just to let you know that we have quite a few questions coming in from the panel. I'm going to start reading some of those out. They're quite interesting. So, but first of all, if you could just move to Eric and Katie, thank you. If you have any further comments on this.
Yeah, I think there's a paradigm shift happening at the moment away from medicines being the sort of end product for big pharma in terms of a tablet, capsule, or whatever, more to a holistic treatment with a diagnostic potentially and a digital therapeutic. And I think I get the points about big pharma being risk averse, but I think this is going to force them to overcome that, because I think there's going to be a drive in competitiveness around. There's a lot of talk about patient centricity at the moment, or what does that really mean? For me, it's about getting a better treatment outcome for the patient, because you're not just giving them a medicine, you're giving them the means to measure how that medicine's behaving, a way to interface with doctors or nurses to give them advice on an ongoing basis. It's a much more holistic approach, which I think will be much more powerful, and I think it will force big pharma to collaborate with the likes of Amazon and new novel distribution routes, novel IT providers, etc., because they won't be able to provide the elements beyond the medicine much themselves.
That's great. Thank you, Katie. Eric, do you have any further comments on that?
Yeah, well, I think in the past decade, we have even seen even more innovation, stimulation out of the governments, the non-profit organizations that try to put academia together with technology providers and end users, where, of course, the end users, they have a certain problem to be solved. And they will then use such organizations to spread the question around and to see if they can cluster up some consortia. We have seen in Europe, for example, the CC Flow consortia originated out of Austria to solve some problems related to flow chemistry and to expand the process windows. But also the contract manufacturers, I think they are trying to keep up to date on the developments at the academia on new chemical entities, and they try to look forward and think about how will these be produced in the future in a large scale. We have seen, for example, in the antibody drug conjugation area, an evolution from a more random or stochastic distribution towards a site-specific distribution, where the drug antibody ratio is very specific, like 2 or something, knowing that it can go more or less from 0 to 8. But to develop a manufacturing technology that allows to produce this on a large scale and cost-effective and sustainable, etc., I think that really requires a partnership between CRO, CDMO, and end user, the pharma customer, all for the benefit of patients, of course.
No, I think that they're really good points. points, Eric. We've not really talked about the large molecules, if you will, if you class those ADCs as that. But yeah, I fully agree with that in terms of that and the biologicals as well. I'm just going to ask. Oh, sorry, David. Did you want another question?
Yeah, I was just going to come back on Detlef and make sure we're not agreeing with each other too much. I don't actually recognise that even large pharma is as sort of obsessed about risk as it was. And there's different types of risk, and we probably haven't got time to go into that. But I mean, we're entering a completely new business model where a lot of the big blockbusters have happened, that they're all done. And the new business model is based around smaller patient populations. And, it used to be with precision medicine. Now we're able to ensure that the therapy fits the patient ahead of time, rather than, just scattershot a medicine out there and hope that the patient fits the therapy. So already those types of risks are being reduced, and we're actively working to reduce those for the patient. So it's just where you accept that risk to happen. But in terms of financial risk, I think that yes, pharma stands for stability, and we have to make sure that everything is above board and financially stable as much as anything. But we are making bets off the books. We are funding ventures. We are creating our own venture arms. We're seeding companies and then picking them up and buying them later when we can get through that accelerated early clinical phase. And then we can bring them in and then look at manufacturability and how to widen the patient population more safely. So we're doing a lot of that, but it as I say, tends to be off the books, and a lot of it tends to be outsourced as well. And when we outsource things, the money flows, the outsourcing wave lifts all boats. So, a lot of innovation happens because of pharma money, not necessarily because of pharma.
Yeah, I think they're all really good points. I mean, did you want to respond to that at all, Detlef, or are you going to take that on the chin and accept all those points?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with David. So I think there is always a movement into the right direction, but I think we still need to be, I think, more flexible, and I think differently, and not just let's say the typical behaviors. But that's the way how we're doing it since 20 years, and that's what we have seen, I think, when doing our phase 3 studies. So we have chosen a completely different approach. And after an expert was telling us, "Oh, you will never get it through the authorities." And every pharma company, I think we were talking as potential licensing partners, they were just stating, "Yeah, but I think that's not, I think, the way how it's done, I think, since the last 20 years." And I think at the end of the day, we just got the go-ahead from the authorities, and everyone was asking us, "How have you done it?" I said, "Yeah, because I think our motivation is if someone's standing up saying, 'That's the way how we're doing it since 20 years,' then it's the right time, I think, to change it." And I think that's something we need to be more proactive and move out of our comfort zone every day a bit, and not just, let's say, again, I think a bit black and white criticism, and not just put money in, let the others do, and then see what happens. So I think the biotechs are not, I think, or in most cases, not in the position, I think, to develop or to bring a product to the point of final clinical study and to market it. And that's the expertise of the innovator companies. They might struggle, I think, to come back quickly with new ideas, new technologies. That's what they need to get from outside. But they need to support more, and at least from my perspective, more, I think, the small companies to drive these great ideas forward, and not just let them do it and wait. Still, I think, fine to put some money in, but I think there's more, I think, what needs to come instead of just money.
Yeah, I think they're all very good points. Excellent, actually. I'm delighted that we've had some questions from the audience, quite a few. So I'm going to read a couple of these, as you might imagine, along the themes that we've discussed already. So I hope I pronounced this correctly. So Shah Akgar asks, what outcomes can be measured to evaluate the quality and sustainability and success of a partnership collaboration. So obviously there's some simple metrics there, aren't they? And you know, you can start talking about milestones and milestone successes. But for me, that's not good enough. Okay, just getting to the next milestone isn't good enough. You know, at the end of the day, the real success is if you've treated patients, you know, and you've treated patients with a novel medicine or something that's, you know, proves to be safe and does its thing. You know, so any comments on that, on how we might measure the success of partnerships? And great question.
Yeah, I'm happy to start, if that's okay. I think, I mean, you're right. I think from a pharmaceutical development perspective, it can be obviously on the medicine and in turn the patient. But I think, you know, on the business level, I think you've got to have metrics that, you know, you can monitor and track to make sure that you're meeting each other's expectations. Otherwise, the partnership will just unravel. So I would encourage anyone in a strategic partnership to really think about what is success in the partnership from a collaboration and an integration perspective, and always try and meet them objectives as a partnership.
I think David, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, totally. And Ross is absolutely right. All I'd add to that is that they need to be joint objectives, and they need to be set before you go into that collaboration. And they need to be reviewed regularly. So, I mean, the way we do it is we make sure that we're partnering with the right people, and that, you know, they have as much mutual interest in partnering with us as we do with them. So it's never just a one-sided if we can help it. So therefore, the kind of joint metrics and you know, the end point, if you like, of the partnership is measured, and we can tell if we're on track to build that mutual value, rather than just, is this contract working, have we met milestone 1 or milestone 2, and does that initiate a payment? It has to be a lot more than that, and they have to be jointly set.
I agree, and you know, there's a lot of you know, risk sharing programs out there, aren't there? And my question is always, who's taking the risk? You know, and if it's always on one party versus the other, then obviously that's not really risk sharing, isn't it? Is it? You know, so I don't know whether anybody's got any comments on that. Maybe Katie or Eric.
I was just going to it might sound a bit flippant, but I think a key metric of a successful partnership is, would you go into partnership with those people again? And that's maybe something to think about while you're doing it. Am I enjoying this? Are these people I actually want to partner with in the future? And I think that if the answer is yes, then that's a measure of a successful partnership. But I agree with what the other panelists have said too. And it's really key to make sure you're aligned, and that you stay aligned, that you have a clear roadmap for how to get there, and that you have a detailed plan behind that. And a lot of people don't really like detailed plans because it's a bit boring and tedious. But I think that getting that rigor in for a collaboration, for the transparency, especially with all this remote working as well, so that everybody can see the same version of the truth and can see whether things are on track or not, and also being honest when they're not, because there is a real tendency to make sure everything's green, because then everybody will be happy and then they won't give us a lot of grief. But actually, in a true effective collaboration, you should actually focus on the areas that are not green and be happy that they're there, and that you can discuss them and get things back on track.
No, good point. Eric?
Yes, maybe a comment. I think in a partnership, of course, you have several parties, and they all want to benefit from the results. And this can be put down on paper and bullet point list. But I think there also has to be a third dimension, in that the results should also be beneficial for society. If the innovation has proven to deliver a new method that is maybe requiring less raw materials, less waste, less risk for those who have to produce it, and eventually also to the patient, then I think that is another dimension of the success of a partnership.
That's some great points. Back to the COVID-19 question now, I'm afraid, something that's been etched on our minds for this year, but Janet Halliday has asked, and I think this is a really good point. Whilst the trials of COVID-19 have gone really well, other trials have been affected. How can we transfer the learning of COVIDs to other therapies? I think we've touched on little bits of that, but I think it'd be great to have a view from the panel there. I mean, maybe I can start. Why do drugs fail in a nutshell? Other than for company reasons and portfolio reasons, essentially they don't work or they're not safe. And to understand those two things as quickly as possible is really the barrier to going forward. So any thoughts on those two areas really, and how can we transfer the success, the speed of these COVID vaccines into other areas?
Happy to go first. I think having a holistic approach, as you mentioned, Richard, to try and find out, is it efficacious and is it safe as early as possible. So in the early development, try and kill quick if it's not efficacious and it's not safe. I think that's the mantra one has to have, rather than holding on to that glimmer of hope that the asset's going to make it. Refocus your efforts onto a new asset that is going to benefit patients. So I think breaking down the silos perhaps between, I see it in primary manufacturing, drug substance and drug product. What can you do around that sort of formulation strategy where you can actually use all the good principles of primary manufacturing, solid state, material characterization and formulation development together, and then work with other facets of drug development to make informed decisions such as DMPK and in vivo tox. So I think working smarter and working across larger teams and being able to solve them challenging problems together earlier will benefit all novel medicines.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Ross, and it does frustrate me. Things come across my desk when somebody wants some help with some formulation, for example, because the bioavailability is unacceptable. Well, actually, when you delve down into the science, you realise that the molecule is flawed, and actually no amount of formulation will help. And that's extremely disappointing. And something could have been done about that in that design phase. Any other comments on that?
So, Richard, I would add a third to your list, which is, medicines fail even if they're approved, if they're not taken.
Yeah.
And, and so this is where our patient-centric design comes in. If you design a medicine so that it can be ultimately taken, then you increase the adherence and the compliance and everybody's happier. And it goes back to Eric's point about, reducing the burden on the healthcare system. If patients are taking our medicine, it's our responsibility to make sure that they do that by having that centric design. And so I link that then to clinical trials and how to de-risk that during the COVID time or any other time. And again, we can learn by bringing the trials to patients. So it means more home-based trials, which may or may not mean that we need to design some kind of device so that it's easier to get the data from the patient and to actually deliver that clinical-based medicine into the patient at their homes and not require them to come into a hospital or centre. That's something we've seen quite a bit of too.
No, I think they're really good points, David. And Detlef, you're very well poised at moving things quickly and getting into the clinic and phase 3 trials. Do you have any further comments on that?
No, yeah, I think I completely agree with David. So, I think we need to develop things faster. I think not just trying to let's say stay with the processes we have used in the past, be more flexible. And then I think you're absolutely right. I think we need to develop, I think already in the clinical phase, I think products and ways of application, I think, which suits the patient and try to make that at home. Because what we were facing, I think, patients were not coming to hospitals for the clinical study because of COVID. I think we had completely different indication, but that was a challenge for us. So if there's a way, I think, that we can deliver the medication even for clinical trials to the patient's home, I'm as well sure, I think they will be more, I think, focused on taking it appropriately. And I think we can really get them, I think, where they are. So I completely agree with you, David.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it still staggers me, even in this day and age, that we dose on a milligram basis per patient, irrespective of their background, their size, their diet, their co-meds, etc. That's just staggering, isn't it? And not good science, I would say.
I had a discussion with someone on 3D printing of tablets, and I think that can be a fantastic idea. I think just to make a patient, I think, perfectly fitting medication, at least for clinical trial. I don't think that's suitable for commercial supply at the moment, but for clinical studies, I think that can be a fascinating opportunity to make something what is perfectly fitting to the patient on time and delivering it to the patients for the clinical study.
Absolutely. No, I've got another question actually, which is a little bit more left field, but I think it's perfect with regards to this collaboration. So it's a question from James Rankin, and he asks, what are the panel's views about the potential alternative models for intellectual property ownership in the future? And I think that's a great question, isn't it? So who owns the IP? Are there other ways of sharing this around, shall we say, sharing the rewards around? So I don't know whether we've got a view there from perhaps the biotech, the pharma, and maybe the CRO as well on that one. Anybody want to take that one? It's a bit more of a left field question and thinking outside the box.
I'll give it a go. So I've been spending quite a long time recently putting together a collaboration across different pharma companies and delivery partners. And we have spent a lot of time talking about IP, who owns it, what's the value of the background IP, and how do you divvy that up in terms of the foreground IP. But actually, I think we've come to a really good position, and I think you can be quite creative. If everybody has the same goal of wanting to develop the technology, it comes back to one of the panelists said earlier that everybody needs to get something out of the collaboration. So you need to start from wanting to be fair. And yeah, Big Pharma are putting in a lot of money and the delivery partners bringing all the background IP, and neither can succeed without the other. But ultimately, there's a big prize for the pharma companies potentially in applying the new technology, and therefore they're willing to pay a premium for that, but only at the point where it's been demonstrated to be useful and they actually want to start applying it to a molecule. So they are going to start realizing the value, and at that point they'll start paying a premium then for the background IP. But then there comes the sticky discussions about, well, to what extent do you protect that IP for other pharma companies being able to use it or not, and what price do you charge them? And then it comes back to, well, what are you trying to achieve here? So MMIC, we want to accelerate the use of innovative technology for all pharma manufacturing, not just for the pharma companies that have bought into the collaboration to pay for it. So then it comes down to a balance. If you don't want to make it too restrictive, you want to make sure that there is that access, but then you have to put a dollar value on what is the cost of that going to be, because you have to be able to protect the interest and show good value to your collaborative partners as well, otherwise they won't invest.
Yeah, I think that's some really good points. Anybody else have a comment on that, Albert?
Yep, I'm happy to take a few comments. So I think, the pharmaceutical IP model, where a lot of the IP and the sort of the value resides with the asset, it's actually fixed quite early into the drug development process. Over 90%, is a factoid nowadays, I think, but still fail beyond that candidate nomination into launch. So you would think that there has to be a bit of a disruption, because where's the value for the people who help develop and manufacture the pharmaceutical? And I think with the rise of digital tech as well, where's the payback for the disruption that's going to happen there? So I think there's got to be more of a share on that initial asset IP, so that all people come into the party to be able to have patient-centric medicines can share in the downstream returns. So I think, I'm hoping that there'll be more of a share of that IP going forward, because I think there'll be more to benefit for patients if great technologies from outside of the sector can come together and help on making that candidate molecule get to patients and get to market and bring down that attrition rate.
No, that's it. That's great points. We are coming to the end of the session. Time flies when you're having fun. I do have one more question that I'd just like to ask that's just coming from Simon Taylor. There's plenty more, and we could have carried on here, but just one quick question I think is a really good one. It says, building on the them and us theme and the future of outsourcing innovation, how do we encourage and make it easier for pharma to build partnership and expertise wherever it may be found, rather than simply with the large one-stop shop vendors? I think it's a really good point. I don't know if anybody wants to quickly take that, and then we're going to have to wrap up, I'm afraid.
So it's difficult. What I read from the CRO market is that there's been so much investment over recent years. So a lot of the money that had gone into CMOs has now gone into CROs. And whilst that's great for innovation and it means that I've got lots of people that I can partner with, it's being consolidated. So because there's money and investment, even CMOs are picking up, these smaller companies. So it makes it easier for me to have a more expanded partnership. I need to run that a different way, but in some ways it's simple. It's simpler. But yeah, it's a concern that these smaller innovation hubs are being picked up.
That's great, thank you. And I'm afraid I've been given the marching orders to wrap up now. So, it's been great. It's really flown by, this session. Thank you so much for the panel, for being so interactive. Also really delighted with the audience and all the questions. There were still more coming. So just like to finally say thank you very much from myself, and I wish everybody a good day.